All right, so today I wanted to kind of take you through an example of one of the types of lab tests that I will run with my clients. This one was for an elite level athlete, female. That's about all I can tell you, but she was having a lot of challenges and struggles revolving chronic pain, problems with movements, things of that nature, as well as like headaches and emotional type, I guess, mood swings and things like that. And then all these symptoms. Oh, also a big one, eye-related pain. But all these symptoms would get much worse during her monthly menstrual cycle and also the week prior. And she would experience really severe cramping and had always experienced cramping throughout her life, starting with menstruation, that is. So, anyways, so we decided, besides doing some neuro work, which went fantastically as well, we decided to run this Dutch test. And the Dutch test is a hormone test that looks at cortisol and the sex hormones, DHEA, that kind of stuff. And it does it in a little bit different way because it uses urine to look at the metabolites from, the liver as the liver processes all the sex hormones, and it gives us a full picture as to what's going on. So on a normal saliva-based cortisol test, we would see that the sorry, I'm looking for it now because I wasn't paying attention. Yeah. So on a normal test, we would see the free cortisol, and we'd say, okay, it's a little bit on the high side, um, but her adrenals are, producing cortisol quite well. So we don't need to introduce any types of adrenal support. We're actually looking pretty good here. If anything, we may need to find ways to reduce it. But with this type of test, it actually looks at the metabolized cortisol. So this is the total cortisol output from the adrenals, and as you can see, this is low right here, so we're below the low mark. So she's not producing enough. Um, so let me run you through this test real quick, just so you have an understanding, and I'll tell you kind of like what we're doing with it. But her estrogen's low, her progesterone is low, testosterone is low, and this test is taken on day 21 of the cycle. So we should excuse me, I can't talk. We should see a surge in progesterone during this time, so it should be a lot higher, and that's going to account for quite a few symptoms, including the insomnia, which I forgot to tell you about. If we look here, this is kind of her cortisol rhythm. So cortisol is considered to be diurnal, which means it should be high at certain times of the day and low at certain times of the day. So upon waking, it should raise and continue to raise and become its highest, and then it's supposed to, kind of decrease for your afternoon slump, so to speak, and then it should be its lowest at night when it's time to go to sleep. So cortisol is actually your stress hormones, how you respond to stress, any type of stress, but it's also what wakes you up in the morning. So as you can see here, she's a little bit on the high side pretty much everywhere, and she's actually high at night. And I tend to see that one when there's some type of pathogenic infection, chronic infection that's going on, and we'll get to that in a minute. Her DHEA over here, that's the hormone that produces the rest of the sex hormones, and it's actually in a really good spot, so that looks good. And again, this metabolized cortisol is low, and yet her free cortisol is towards the high side. So this combination basically tells me that for some reason her liver isn't metabolizing the cortisol quickly enough. It's just kind of letting it hang out there in the tissues, and we tend to see hypothyroidism whenever that is going on, and we also tend to see potentially like some kind of liver pathway that's not functioning as well as it should. So those are the two main things that we think at this point. Let me see if there's any more I want to talk about on this. Hang tight. There we go. This is on 2 pages. Okay, so as we can see each part of the pathway for how testosterone is made, how um, you know basically what type of testosterone we've got. Um, there's a lot going on here, and I don't want to bury you in this test, but there's different types of estradiols, which is the estrogen, and we can see kind of how that's being metabolized. So then we can kind of check methylation activity, which is like how DNA is replicated and how some of your neurotransmitters are created, and detoxification pathways, things like that. So it's very important. I think we've pretty much hit it all, but ignore the melatonin. She was taking a supplement. But this just gives us an overall picture that the hypothalamus in the brain is telling the pituitary to then tell the adrenal glands to go and make DHEA and cortisol. And we can see there that this isn't happening properly on the cortisol side. All right, cool. So that's our main takeaway from this lab so far. I'm going to pull up another lab real quick. So give me 1 second. All right, sweet. All right, cool. So this one is just a regular lab test that she had already gotten done a few months prior to seeing me from her MD. And like I told you, we tend to see hypothyroid whenever we have, high free cortisol but low overall cortisol production. So on here, we can go to the bottom. Sorry, everything's split on 2 pages here. So on the right side, we've got TSH, and that is the hormone sent from the HPA, or the hypothalamus pituitary, down to the thyroid to tell it to make more thyroid hormone. So this is really, really low, and usually we see that when there is hyperthyroid, so there's too much thyroid hormone. In her case, her free T3 is pretty much right where we want it, because we want it towards the top end. And the free T4 is looking at to be pretty good as well. So her thyroid looks to be producing the thyroid hormone, but again, it's not being metabolized. It's just kind of hanging out there. And so, you would think that the liver is problematic. I skipped over one of the liver markers on the other test that showed, in fact, that the liver was like the 2 different types of pathways you want to check were both functioning well. So it's not the liver. And so what's left over is the hypothalamus pituitary not telling the different organs like the ovaries, the thyroid, and the adrenals to create hormones. And in her case, she had had a really bad concussion and was still having concussion symptoms. So it actually kind of all adds up. So there's a lot more going on in this test. She's got towards the low end of protein. She may not be digesting her protein well. She's also got some glucose management stuff going on. And then, and then on the eosinophils, it's getting a little bit on the high side. Anytime we see it above 3, we start thinking parasitic infection, maybe some kind of like food sensitivity type reaction. So, there's enough going on here that we want to go ahead and look at her gut. So we ordered another test that we're waiting for the results on. And that's a DNA-based test to look at all the different pathogens and whatnot in the GI tract. But as you can see, we've got an HPA axis that's not turning on the sex hormones, the thyroid, and whatnot. So we're taking some different herbals to increase the, basically to tell the HPA to make more hormones. And then there's a few other support type things that we're taking as well. But this is kind of how it all comes together. And we've got this integrated in with her neurology training. So she's actually doing quite well just in a few weeks. Her symptoms have dramatically reduced to the point where sometimes she has no symptoms whatsoever, and she can actually train, continue her training much more. So everything's going really good. But just wanted to share this process with you guys so you can see kind of how it takes shape for an athlete. You don't have to be an athlete because you have the same body and everything works the same way. It's just the demands on the body are a little bit different. But it works similar for anybody. So hit me up if you have any questions, and I hope you got a lot out of this. Thanks.